Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Uniform with the LT's daughter. Today's guest is not only a perfect guest for me and for this podcast, but I just learned that he was also recently inducted into the National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame. He is a retired NYPD detective, and you guys know that New York City is my second home, and the NYPD has a special place in my heart. But Tom Smith, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor, a privilege, and been looking forward to this since we set it up. So thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. And Jessica Flores is the one who introduced us. I had her on my podcast long, long ago when I first put it out there. I think it's like episode 4. And I think it's actually the most listened to episode I have. So very exciting.
Jess is the best.
Yeah,
Like me and you, like I was with Jess. When you meet people in this little world that we're in, you just click with people and you're on the same page and you got the same message. So that's why, hooking up with Jess was easy and then getting together with you was easy. So no brainers.
absolutely. And she connected us because of the interview that she had with you, and some things resonated with her kind of on my behalf as it pertains to family life. And so I want to get in to why you decided to join law enforcement. What was the path that you took to become an officer?
Well, the path was my dad was an NYPD detective. So I grew up in that world. He was my hero. He was everything I wanted to be. He was larger than life, the absolute, if you could have a picture in your head of an old-time Irish detective,
Uh,
it was him, 6'3", white hair, 230, that was him. So I just grew up listening to the stories and driving to Yankee Stadium and getting a story of every street corner and every building in the Bronx that something happened. There was a double homicide there. I chased the guy down that stairwell over there. And it was just something, there wasn't a time growing up I wasn't fascinated by it. And then in the 70s, I'm older than you, but in the 70s, you had the best TV cop shows
mm,
ever created, from SWAT to the Rookies and Starsky and Hutch and all that. So I have my dad, and then I have the TV world that just combined to something I just wanted to do. And luckily, I had the opportunity to do it, when I was older, and kind of, relied on him a lot, with advice. Hey, we're doing this. What do you think? I got this going. What do you think? And having him be even a part of my career was so important to me, being where I came from growing up.
I love that you were able to kind of have him as a mentor in your life, professionally speaking. When you told him that you wanted to kind of follow in his footsteps and get into law enforcement, what did he say?
At first, I had two paths. I was either going to be a cop or play baseball. That's what it was
Okay.
going to be. And again, it would never get out of my body. It would never get out of my head of what I wanted to do. So I think at first, if I remember, it was like, why don't we kind of look at something else, because, you got to remember at the time in New York City in the mid 80s, when I started the process to become a cop, the city was incredibly dangerous and out of control, and cops were getting killed, and the homicide rate was around 3,000, and crack started. So it was a dangerous, time in New York City. And, I'm his only son, so that played a part in it. Having my mom go through everything again,
Mhm.
what she went through with my dad in the 60s and 70s, of everything going on in the city at that time. There was a little reluctance, but then I think it quickly he realized that my mind was not going to get changed. Uh, and he was my biggest fan and biggest supporter that I'll ever have, next to my family now, but just different levels. And like you said, Kat, it was great having him be part of it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that so much. How old were you when you became a cop?
22.
Okay,
I'm
so you were a
a kid.
baby.
Yep.
Were you
20.
married at the time?
No, I was with my girlfriend at the time, became my wife and still is after 32 years,
Wow.
which is another oddity, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Uh, No, so, I wasn't, but she knew right away what I was planning on and what I was waiting to get into the academy and all that when we met. So she's been on the same ride for all these years as well.
Yeah, and so she was with you through the academy. How did you guys kind of navigate those new experiences?
Yeah, it was tough. We didn't see, we just had a set schedule. We didn't see a lot of each other, just because when I was in the academy, our academy class was so big. We had
Mhm.
like 25, 2,700 people in the
Wow.
academy one time. So we had to have 2 different squads. So 1 week you did day tours, and then 1 week you did 4 to 12s. So on the 4 to 12 week, we didn't see a lot of each other because she was working during the day, and then I would leave and go to the academy. So, we saw more of each other on our days off, or when I did day tours was an easy one. I'd get home, I'd do whatever homework I had to do, whatever studying I had to do, and then, we'd get together at night. But that set the tone of what it was gonna be. Uh,
Mhm.
and if she was able to stick with me and handle that through the academy, things were gonna be okay. And obviously, like I just said, after being together for 35 years, and married for 32, I think she's got it.
Yeah, that's a testament. But I think you made a good point. Like it kind of sets the tone, and if you're able to navigate that and just kind of ride the waves as they come, that kind of will serve you throughout the rest of the relationship and the rest of the career.
Yeah, and it's not easy. It's hard. I
Mhm.
said it forever. One of the hardest jobs in the world is the spouse of someone in law enforcement or the military, because we know where we are. We know what we're doing. We know what's going on during the course of a day or a tour, and they're not. They wait for the garage door to go open or the front door to open, and that's about it, or a phone call to say hi. So that is extremely hard to do and to stick it out, and understanding what it entails is a rough job. It's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of belief and faith in the spouse, in the person who is doing the job, and a lot of just reliance on like no news is good news because, like you said, the police officer or the military knows what's happening. They know that they're safe, but the spouse just kind of has to lie in wait until they get official word or they walk through the door or what have you. So that's not easy at all. You, though, grew up with a father in law enforcement, so you were sort of familiar with the lifestyle and some of the nuances that come with that. Do you think that that helped you navigate your career?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Knowing, what it entailed, and even just hearing stories of, being at work for a couple of days because of a homicide, or having to go somewhere, even just hearing the stories of it, familiarize myself with what was ahead. And it got much, once 9/11 happened, was a completely different story. But just the day-to-day work in the Bronx and Manhattan and all that, I did get a good sense of it. And on my wife's part, she had my mom to talk to. My mom went through it for 26 years, through the worst times of New York City as well. I have 4 older sisters who went through it. So my sisters and my wife are very, very close. So those conversations always took place. And if I was away or down at work for a number of days, she always got a phone call from one of my sisters. Hey, he's good. Everything's okay. And just reassuring her, of everything they went through with my dad, to be okay and everything was going to work out.
I love that. That's so nice. I talk about Well, a lot of times I talk about the importance of having non-law enforcement relationships, but I also mention that my family had built-in law enforcement relationships. My aunts were both also married to cops. My dad's brothers were cops. So we had like this
Mhm.
built-in ecosystem, kind of like you just mentioned, where my mom and my dad are both the babies in their family. So like if my mom was going through something or if my dad was on night work and she's got all these little kids at home, we would go hang out with our aunts and they could kind of give her peace of mind and things like that. And I think that that also is very important. And I love that you guys had that experience, that your wife had that experience with your family. I think that's so special. When it comes to growing up with a father in law enforcement, I know you were mentioning he's your hero and he shared stories with you and things like that. What else was it like? Did you ever experience moments of stress, or does anything else stand out to you?
No, not see, you gotta he retired when I was 9, so I didn't really have to live with what actually went into his job. Did I know he was at work and we would go to the precinct, go into a Yankee game or something? Yes. I knew all that, but the integral parts of what went into his work, I experienced or found out later. But the one thing that always stood out with my dad that I carried into my life with law enforcement was no matter what was going on, whether he had, like I said, homicide, robbery, bank robbery, whatever was going on, he never missed anything we were doing. He never missed a game, a bowling tournament, a basketball game, whatever me or my sisters had going, he never missed them. He was always there. And I knew how important that was to me playing
Mhm.
baseball and seeing him, standing at the fence or my sister's doing something and he used to go to like company softball games that my sisters played in because they weren't playing. So he made it a point to get there. And that was one huge thing that I took from him with my family and my kids going, forward with my life. So not so much the job. I mean, I got a lot of his personality and the way he is or was when he worked, I have. And I would get that from my sisters, like, my God, your dad. Or the way I say something or just act or whatever. So thankfully a lot of his personalities in me, which I think always help.
Yeah. I love what you just shared about not missing experiences for his kids, and then that's something that you took and passed on. And I'd love for you to share more about that if you could, because something I hear a lot is I can't not miss things. My schedule is this, I have to do this, work is this. I have to miss all of these things that my kids are doing. And while that may be true in some stages or some chapters and some instances, I think it's really important. I talk about it with my dad. Philadelphia, you were NYPD and you were very, very active as a detective, doing a lot of special cases. So, how did you, and if you recall, how did you and your dad navigate that and make sure that you did show up for those things?
Well, for my dad, back in his time was a little easier than mine, but he
Yeah.
just didn't care. He would stop what he was doing and get in the car and come home.
Yes.
I would say to him, how are you here? He's like, well, where else am I going to be? So that was him. He would just drop what he was doing. Mine was a little bit more of scheduling.
Mhm.
A lot of times when I worked, especially later, in the terrorism task force, I was able to schedule things a little better. Hey, do things happen that you can't control? Absolutely. And my kids always understood if I didn't get somewhere, which was maybe 1% of the time, they knew it was something that was unavoidable. But I would just work really hard at okay, here's what's going on. Let me make sure I'm here. I had a calendar book, a calendar on my desk once, and one of my coworkers looked at it, and my calendar was color coordinated. So red ink was my oldest daughter, blue ink was my middle girl, and black was my son. And my calendar would be filled with what they had going, on what date. So I knew ahead of time softball schedules, dance competitions, baseball,
Mhm.
taekwondo, whatever they were in was laid out in my calendar. And one day, one of the guys looked at it and went, "What the hell is that?" And I go, "That's my life. That's what that is." And he's like, "When are you here?" I'm like, "Well, in between all that. That's what I'm here doing, what I'm doing." But that's just the way I was, and I moved heaven and earth to make sure I didn't miss anything. And there's one story I just told the other day that I think will fit into this, that if you don't mind me telling,
Please.
uh, which kind of was the best way. It's hard to tell because it is an emotional story. And I was in Afghanistan for 3 months in 2009, doing a kidnapping case. And during that time, my oldest daughter is a big softball player, and she actually made the varsity team, JV team in the 7th grade. She pitched, and she was, thank God, very, very good. So in the beginning of the season, I was in Afghanistan. I wasn't home, and I coached my daughter from the time she was 6 to the time she was 24 years old. I coached her. So everything about her softball career, I was involved in. So now I have to be over on the other side of the world when she's starting her JV career. And she's playing in the game and she's pitching. And because of the time difference, it's about 1 in the morning in Afghanistan. And I'm standing outside the embassy with my phone, and my wife is relaying what's going on in the game while she's pitching. And I'm like, I'm paying attention. I'm looking at my phone. I'm waiting for her to get back to me of what she's doing. And my wife would say, "Hey, she's doing this." And I would tell her, "Okay, tell her this, yell this to her." And she started saying stuff yelling from the stands. And my daughter, like, kind of looked at my wife, like, "How do you know how to say that?" And my wife held up the phone.
Oh.
So my daughter knew it was me. And then I turn around at the embassy and I have 10 guys around me waiting to hear the results of the game because they weren't with their kids.
Yeah.
So we're all kind of watching, and I got Marines, guys from, Navy SEALs, agents, all this around me going, "Okay, how many outs are there? What's going on?" And then she ends up striking the last girl out and wins her first game on JV. So we all jumped around and yelled and screamed in the middle of Afghanistan because of something that was going on in New York.
Wow, that's amazing. That story made me emotional. That's really sweet. And I think that too is a testament to you and your wife and how you guys are able to kind of communicate and operate in tandem. And she was quite literally able to be a voice for you when you couldn't be there yourself.
Yeah, and my daughter actually wrote a paper uh, for a college and actually got a partial scholarship because of that story.
Oh, wow.
Part of one of the topics was, what's an event that, you've done it a million times. What's an event that was impactful or whatever?
Mhm.
And she wrote a whole paper on that story and actually got a partial scholarship for that. So that made it cool too.
Yeah, that's really cool. I also want to just mention you said that you coached her. So
Mhm.
not only did you not miss games, but you also put in the work to coach her and help her develop that skill for herself.
Yep. So in between working that we just went over, I coached baseball and softball for like 17 years in
Wow.
between everything else. And that was the best thing in the world. I softball with her, baseball with my son. And then my middle girl is a big, big dancer. So, and started off playing softball, but then had to choose between dancing and softball. And we knew where that was going to go. And she danced in college and she modeled and she had her whole thing that she was doing. But on top of coaching and that, if Nikki had a photo shoot or something, I had to meet her at the George Washington Bridge, and my in-laws would drop her off. I'd take her down to the photo shoot, then go home, and so I was nonstop all the time with them. But you know what? And here's the reason for it, and here's kind of my motto when it comes to what I did. You get one shot at this. You
Mhm.
get one shot at raising your kids. You get one shot in life, and you get one shot to make an impactful, be meaningful in your kid's life. Rarely are there do-overs in life. You get one time, one shot at it. And I just wanted to make the best I could with that one shot. And that's why I just did what I did. And I figured I'd rest later. When I get older, I can rest then when they're all older and settled and where they need to be, and I'll eventually get there. And that's now. So it worked out well.
Yeah, they're all grown now?
Yeah, 28, 24, and 21.
Wow. And is it girl, girl, boy?
Yep,
That's
yep,
how my family is too. Girl, girl, boy. And I'm the
yep.
middle.
Yep. And I was the baby. I had four older sisters, so
Wow.
uh, I know what my son goes through.
Yeah.
I used to say I had five moms.
Oh,
Uh,
that's so funny. That's funny. I should ask my brother about that. So I'm sure I know the answer to this question, but I'd love to just kind of hear a little bit more about it. And you kind of just touched on it, but did it pay off? How did it pay off for you to put in all that time and attention and sacrifice yourself in some ways for the relationship that you now have with your kids and who they became and who they're going to go on to be?
Every single second was worth it. Not sleeping, driving fast somewhere, missing, something else I could have been doing. I didn't care. And I see them today, and they're all so successful in where they're going in their careers that they're just starting out with. My son's graduating college early. My girls are getting their careers already with their master's degrees, and coaching. Taylor had a extremely uh, good softball career, successful softball career. Nicolette danced in college and continues to choreograph for a dance studio on top of her career, which she's, starting now. My son is off and running. He's all set with what he's going to do in his life. And they never got in trouble. I thank God for that. They just didn't, and a lot of that was I just passed on what I was told. That's all I did. Everything I grew up learning, I just passed to them. And they know, and the good thing was they know what I do for a living and I did for 30 years, so they can't BS me or lie to me because it's never going to work. And they know that. So, that one little look that I can give them, like, what'd you do? They're
Yeah.
not gonna, yeah, they know lying or whatever is never gonna work. Which was my thing when I grew up with my dad. And our thing in our family was not that my mom was super involved in our lives. My God, she grew up with three older brothers, so she was tough as hell. Couldn't get anything past her either. But because of what my father was involved in, when we lived in the city, my sisters instilled in me, you're not going to you can't get in trouble. A, because you just don't want to get in trouble, but B, don't embarrass dad. And that
Mm,
was the biggest thing in my sister's lives growing up and me. Because whoever, if you got to a really bad thing and the cops showed up to whatever it was, they're going to know dad, dad's going to know them, and it's going to get back to him in about 12 seconds, and it's embarrassing. And that was our biggest thing growing up. Don't embarrass dad. And that's why my sisters and me, we never really, stupid stuff, but never really got in trouble because that's just what we were taught. And I tried my best to, push that on my kids, and they're all very tight with one another. They're each other's best friends. And just never, got in trouble and just bared down in school. And sports was a big plus. And I encourage everyone to get your kids involved in sports. And because you're with, like-minded people who are kind of
mhm.
thinking the same ways, and ideas get thrown around, and just the competition, and failing is okay, not winning is okay. It makes you better, it makes you stronger. And that was what, I basically did. And thank God they got it. People ask all the time, like, how'd you do it? How'd you raise three kids that are good? And I'm like, you pound it into their head, and you hope they get it. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
There's nothing else you can really do but that. And thankfully they did.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because I talk to my mom about this stuff all the time, obviously. And that's something, well, as you were talking, I was like, there's so many synchronicities to my immediate family, to what I'm hearing from you. And something that my mom's friends, family, my dad's old colleagues and their spouses, that's something that they ask my parents all the time is like, how did you end up with these three kids who are good to you, good to each other? Like we are each other's best friends. We're close. We never got into trouble. Yeah, and they're just constantly asking like, what is your secret? And it's funny, like a year ago when I started kind of coming up with this idea and talking to my mom about it, she was like, she told me about this question that they always get asked. And she's like, so you're trying to bottle it up and give it to people so that they can do something similar. And I'm like, yeah, kinda, because you guys cracked the code. Whatever the code is, and I'm still trying to figure it out completely. You guys did it. And apparently you did it too. And so did your parents,
Yep.
which I
Yeah.
love to
That's a
hear.
great way to say break the code, crack the code. And it is. That's all. Listen, nothing's guaranteed in life. There is
Mhm,
no correct path or instilled path in anyone's life. You have to be involved and be part of it and make sure they at least start on that track. You
mhm.
become an adult, you become, what you want to be on your own as you get older, but you hope that you said enough or you did enough for it to stick. And that's all you can do. And luckily, it worked.
Yeah. And I will say a lot of times people are shocked to learn that my parents were really lenient with us. We had the probably the least amount of rules out of all of our friends, and especially modern day cops. They're shocked to hear that. You too? Is that
Yeah.
you guys too? That's what I was going to
Where
ask.
we were, there were definitely yes or no's and everything
Hard
growing up.
nose sometimes,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, there were hard no's.
Yeah.
But you kind of the way I look at it is you can still have those values in you, but you have to kind of mold it to your kids because
Hmm.
I think it just makes it easier. And I think if you have that message, your kids will figure out the hard nose and
Hmm.
then, all right, hey, yeah, you can go out, you can go do that, you can go away, whatever. But still, even if they go away, like maybe we weren't able to do as kids, the hard nose, they still know what they are. Go have
Hmm.
fun. Never take anything away from a kid in being a kid. But understanding the hard nose, I think is important on top of maybe lenient. Okay, you can do that tonight. You can go here, whatever, I think is a good balance.
Yeah, I think what my parents always said was they would choose their battles, and like instead of setting hard and fast rules, they would almost just teach us values and guide us, be our guiding posts in a lot of ways. And like when I was in high school, I dated a guy who was older than me, and people at the time and now would make a big deal out of it. And especially because my dad was in special victims unit. But I was a teenager and I made it very clear that I was going to, date this guy. And my parents, they talked about it with each other. They talked about it with me. Like it was very much discussed. It wasn't something that they, decided on a whim, but it was like, we got to choose our battles. And if we, forbid her from seeing this guy, this could go south really fast. Or we could, hold her hand through this process. And, he wasn't like crazy old. It was like appropriate. But because I was a teenager in high school, it was like question mark. And because of that, if anything had gone awry or been uncomfortable, I could talk to them or I could go to them. They were with me through that process. And it was a fine relationship. We dated for 4 years, like nothing was amiss, but just knowing that I had them in my corner, I think helped a lot and helped me navigate that relationship, helped me navigate my entire adult life, I think, all throughout college and everything that came after.
Oh, I think that's so important. When you get into the sneaking around and secret, and I'm going to do
Yeah.
this behind their back, like I just said, nothing's in stone and anything can go wrong in a heartbeat. And if
Hmm.
it goes wrong and you're running around in kind of this secret little thing, it's
Hmm.
harder to explain what's going on and what happened. And I need your help. And
Yep.
this is bad. Where, as the story you just told, I think is the best case,
Mhm.
kind of, not to say, but here's enough rope. You know,
Exactly. Yes.
here's enough that you can always come back, grab on the
Mhm.
rope and we'll come, but don't hang yourself as well.
Right, exactly. And it's like with that, I knew that they trusted me. So
Mm.
going back to that concept of those hard no's, they didn't have to tell me what the hard no's were. I could deduce that on my own and, weigh those pros and cons myself and ask myself like, how am I going to navigate this? They are trusting me with this, so I'm going to navigate it in the best way possible, using the values that they've instilled in me throughout the course of my life.
Right. I think you just hit the ultimate word is trust.
Yeah.
There's got to be trust on both sides. Trust us that we know what we're talking about because we experienced it,
Mhm.
but trust them that they're growing up and can make these tough decisions, maybe not completely on their own, but have an idea of what they want and the good things.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Did any of your kids ever express a desire to become a cop?
My son is looking into it,
Oh,
for sure. In a kind of different way, but he is. Can't get into what it is yet, because A, I don't want to jinx it.
right, right.
And B, just where he's gonna end up. But I was surprised that my older daughter didn't.
Really?
She's a talented, incredible graphic designer and is going to be a teacher in that. But if any of the three I could pick, I was surprised she didn't find more of an interest in it because that's the way her brain works. Like you can't watch a movie with her because she figures it out in 5 minutes.
That's how my brother is.
Oh, you can't. I mean, she's a pain. If you're watching a movie that you haven't seen before, oh, he did it. You're like, really, really? And she's right.
Yeah.
Then after the movie, she'll tell you why. Well, he did this, he did this, he did.
Yeah, yeah.
You're like, all right, thanks, T. Uh, but like detective games and being on point when she's out, like that's one thing I really taught all my kids, to be aware of where you are, have a plan, know your surroundings, that they're all on point. That
Yeah.
is a big deal with me. But yeah, I was a little surprised she didn't take more of an active role in looking at that. I wouldn't have been surprised.
Did you want them to become cops, or did you not really put any thought into it?
I didn't really think of it as much, it's a totally different conversation with my wife, that's for sure. Than
Yeah.
than my answer. But you know what? I look when it comes to a question like that, I look at me and I look at where, like told you before, my dad was like at first, I don't know, if it's in your world, if it's in your head and it's a passion, I would hate to stop anyone, especially my kids, from doing that because I understand what a passion was and no one was going to stop me from doing to being a cop. Not that I would have disrespected him or anything like that, but I figured he'd come around, at a point because then the pride thing starts, of following the family business
Mhm.
type of thing. So I would never say, no, you're not allowed to kind of follow your dream. I would never do that.
Yeah. Did you ever feel any sort of pressure either put on by yourself or by your family to do or experience certain things because you were following in such big footsteps?
No, I mean, everyone knew my family, my dad, how I was. I'm very aggressive. I'm very, hey, I want this, and go get it. Uh, I knew, kind of going into the law enforcement that I had a really good shot of being successful because of having grown up in it and having kind of a leg up in how certain things worked. Uh, Pretty on point, looking at things and being active in that and having confidence in myself that I could do it. Not to a cocky point by any stretch, but confident in I could do that. I could do that. My biggest drive was to be a detective. That's what I wanted to be. That's all I wanted to be. I didn't care about being a sergeant, lieutenant, I didn't, that wasn't in my wheelhouse. And I would get yelled at later by people that I didn't go that route, but that's something else. But I just wanted that shield. I wanted to, it's all I ever wanted. And that wasn't I wasn't gonna get stopped until I got there. And then it just, the job just became more and more fun as you got more experience and figured things out. And I can do that and I can do this. Uh, so it just became each place I went just opened up more and more doors of having a great career and being successful and being asked to go here or picked up there. When you get those offers, it means a lot because it's a testament that you did something right. You're
Mhm.
doing it right if other people are asking you to join them somewhere. And that was always my goal, and like I said, just working hard was my main thing.
Yeah. I want to get back to your kids and then your wife in a minute, but you just touched on the fact that you wanted to be a detective. And something I wanted to ask you was, how did you kind of come to decide the career path that you were going to take? Because I think that this is something that cops kind of get tripped up in not establishing what they want out of the career and the trajectory that they want to take within their career and really taking ownership and taking the steps to get to where they want to be. I think it's all too common for cops, really for anyone living life, to just kind of let life happen and let the chips fall where they may, or whatever that saying is. And I'm
Mhm.
curious for you because, as you just mentioned, you did decide this is what I want to do. And I think that's really important.
Oh, no doubt. And especially in law enforcement, you should have a game plan.
Yeah.
It's good to dream. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great to have a goal in what you want to, go into the police academy and want to be the police commissioner one day. Cool. Fine. Work hard at getting there. Uh, for me, it was a kind of a series of things. I wanted to do everything I could on patrol and learn the job. That was the main thing. Just learn what policing and police work is all
Mhm.
about and do it the right way and still have your head on your shoulders mentally in preparing and doing all that. And then I wanted to get into the anti-crime unit, which was the plainclothes unit in the precinct. And luckily, I was only in uniform for about 3 years and then went into the anti-crime unit. And always to the goal of getting on the detective path. And I know a couple of spots were opening up and they were picking up in narcotics at the time I'm gonna blow you, in 1994. So, uh, and then put in for narcotics and got picked up and, did well in the interview and got picked up and ended up in the Bronx, which sets you on your detective path. And then after about a year and a half in narcotics, got promoted. So I actually got my shield 7 years after joining the police department, uh, which was the best day in the world. One of the best days in the world. Had luckily, thank knocking on wood, had a couple. But that was when I sat there and you get your shield and you're sitting there and it hits you that I was waiting for this since I'm 8 years old and I
Mhm.
did it. Was a big deal. It was a really big deal. But then it shifts. And I just had this conversation with someone the other day. Then it shifts of now you have a greater responsibility to represent the police department in a different way, represent that shield in a different way. You're not a cop anymore. Now you're an NYPD detective, which is renowned around the world.
Mhm.
Everyone knows that shield, everybody, because of TV and movies. And I really felt the responsibility to represent that in the right way and took it very serious of what I had now. And so, things change a little bit with what your role is now. Uh, and that I loved, run. And it hit me once and you could talk all you want, about the what that shield is and really quick, and you'll love this, I think. I'm in Vegas doing an operation. We were out there doing something one year, and one of the captains from Las Vegas Police Department, they were helping us out doing what we were doing. And he asked me, he goes, Tommy, listen, do you have your shield on you? And I said, yeah, it's in my pocket. He goes, do you mind if I hold it? And I took it out of my wallet and I gave it to him, and he held it in his hands and just went, "Wow." He goes, "This is an NYPD detective shield." He goes, "The only place I've seen this in the movies or on TV. I've never seen it." And I'm like, wow. When you see someone else's reaction of what you are, really hit me. Like, all right, this is this is
Yeah.
legit. And just the watching him look at it and kind of like rub his hand, like, wow, this is cool. And then just like gave it back to me and like shook his head like that was cool.
Wow. That is really cool. And even, obviously I'm a civilian, but even for me, it's cool because like I said before we were recording, I lived in New York for a long time and I got to know, NYPD detectives. And I was even actually, I wanted to mention this because you said you were in the plainclothes unit, which does not exist anymore,
Now,
unfortunately.
unfortunately, big mistake.
Um, I was very upset when that happened because they actually had a big impact on me because there was a time when I lived in New York, I was taking the subway home at night and I was, not to get too detailed, but I was assaulted by a guy. And as I was getting off the train, someone came running after me and like flashed me a little shield and was like, "I need to talk to you," and like tried to pull me over in the corner. And I was like beside myself because of what just happened, because I don't know who this person is. In my head, I'm like, this is a fake shield. It was a
Mhm.
whole to do. But come to find, it was the plainclothes unit, and several more of them showed up afterwards because it was like a, I don't know what you call it, a sting. They
Yeah.
were they were set up at Times Square looking for this guy because he was like a serial or repetitive person, and they were looking for him. And they had been following me. This was such a reality check. They had been following me for a transfer and like a dozen subway stops into a whole nother borough. And I had no idea that he was following me and they were following him, and it was a whole thing. And yeah, I mean, they long story short, they ended up catching him because I was willing to press charges and he went to jail. But yeah, the plainclothes unit has like a special place in my heart. I'm very upset that they got rid of it. And yeah, you sharing that just reminded me of when she like flashed her shield at me, and like the way she did it, it was like, this is supposed to answer all your questions and bring you to ease. And meanwhile, I'm like, don't trust anybody. It's New York City. Like, this could be fake. I was like, do you have a card on you? And she's like, I don't have a card on me. It was a whole thing.
Yep. But no, I agree with you. The biggest that was a disaster getting rid of the anti-crime unit. Because
Yeah.
I look back at when I was in it, how many crimes we prevented and
Mhm.
stopped in the middle of, or locked up guys with guns and shootings and all that. And that was a big mistake.
Yeah, and I mean, even in my own situation, it could have been a lot worse. And I
Mm.
think if they needed to step in, they would have because they were on the car
Sure.
with me. And it didn't get, super out of hand the way I think it could have. It was enough that I was able to press charges. But had it gone any further, I was safe because they were there blending in.
Right. Absolutely. And didn't even know it, which is good.
Exactly. Exactly. They did their job well. There was 4 or 5 of them and I had no
Uh,
clue. Um, I listened to you on another podcast, and on it, you mentioned that you don't drink and didn't drink. And I wanted you to kind of dig into that because I'm sure you won't be surprised to find another thing I hear is we go out after work and we get drinks and we talk about our day, and that's, how we decompress. And I do think that there's, a time and a place for that, and I'm not here to judge, but peer pressure is something that causes it. And sometimes people don't know how to say no or how to stand up for themselves and the fact that they want to go home and see their family or they don't want to drink that night or whatever it is. And I'd love for you to share how you kind of stood up for yourself and your own values and stuck to them as someone who, sometimes went out with the team and didn't drink.
Yep. When I was younger, when at the most, I would have like a beer, if that, when
Hmm.
I was growing up, but never liked it. It wasn't, and a
Hmm.
lot of times, and this is how it kind of switched to everyone realizing that I just wasn't a drinker. Because I mean, I grew up as an athlete, I played everything, and it was just not my dad never drank, never
Mhm.
drank, so that was just kind of, and being like him is just something I did. But it was funny because we would go out, and after a while, I would, hey, Tom, Smitty, here's a beer, whatever. And I would take it, and I would take a sip and hold the same beer bottle all night
Mhm.
and just hold it so
Yeah.
no one would bother me with, hey,
Mhm.
you want another one? No, I'm good. And it was full, and I would just hold it. And then after a while, I got just sick of doing that. I'm like, why am I doing this?
Mhm.
And then order a Pepsi or order a Coke. And then anyone I was with realized that. So it wasn't even asked anymore. It was like, all right, here's a Coors Light, here's a Heineken, here's Tommy's Pepsi. So it just became known, even the guys I hung out with, that I didn't drink. Because it wasn't a thing. It wasn't something in me that was going to make me feel accepted more or do this more.
Mhm.
And uh it just wasn't that important to me. And uh like I said, my dad didn't, so I just grew up with that. But I never got the, oh my God, come on, have a drink. Yeah, I just, thankfully I never had to go through that because guys just knew, my workout regimen or playing ball still, because I played ball for a long time, and it just, I felt healthier. I never wanted to be that out of control. I don't know where I am or don't know what I'm
Mhm.
doing, which is never good. So thankfully it wasn't a pressure thing, but I'm glad I was like that, because I think I'm just healthier now. And
Mhm.
like you just asked, it's funny, and I get asked all the time, like, you have to drink. You're an NYPD detective. You have to smoke. I don't even drink coffee. How's that?
Oh man, no
So
coffee?
I'm like, we talk, and goof around with other shows, and probably the show you're talking about with Gretchen and Tab was the same thing with. I am the absolute opposite of everything you see on TV or the movies about an NYPD detective. I'm not overweight. I've been married and with the same girl for 35 years. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't drink coffee. Do I eat some donuts? Yes, I do. Sorry. That's one of the things I can't pass that up or lie about that. Uh, but I had a better time just not worrying about that.
Yeah. And I think that's important though that you just mentioned, like you just set the precedence. It's almost like peer pressure wasn't even an option because it was like, no, this is how I live my life and I'm hanging out and I'm going to do it my way. And I think that's the important takeaway is you set the tone for how others react around you and treat you, and I didn't drink growing up, and no one questioned it. Like in high school, throughout college, even when I was living in New York City, it was similar to you. It was like, okay, we all got our drinks, and Catherine's got her Diet Coke, and we're good to go. And like nobody questioned it.
Yep.
And I think that that came from, I was just like, no, I don't drink. I'll just take the soda and call it a day
Mhm.
and watch you guys act a fool. That's it.
Yep. Yeah, and my kids are like that too. The girls will have their fruity things,
Hmm.
but my son doesn't drink at all.
Hmm.
Never has. So if I can pass that on, great.
Yeah.
There's nothing, listen, you go out, you have a couple of, that's cool. But
Hmm.
I never, it was just never a thought, it wasn't, oh my God, someone's going to ask me about drinking. And it's actually funny because we'll go out sometimes, and here's the perception of NYPD detectives or cops in general. We'll be at a wedding or we'll be somewhere, and someone will come up to our table or in our group that we're standing there, hey, who wants a drink or whatever. And I'll just be like, oh, I'll take a Coke. That's great. And Ange will mention to someone, oh, Tom doesn't drink. And you'll get, how long? Like,
Oh.
no, he's all the time. Like, oh, did he have a problem? No, he just
Oh.
never drank. Oh, she laughs at now it's a joke, whereas when it first was said, it's like, no,
Yeah.
his thing. But now we just laugh at it that every once in a while she'll still get that, like, oh, is he okay?
Yeah, it's like that's the line that they draw.
Yeah,
NYPD detective who doesn't drink, this must be the only answer.
is the only answer. You're right. Yep.
Yeah, that's wild, but yeah, I can see that for sure. Okay, I want to get back to your kids a little bit and your wife. So, when you were a young cop, you had your first child, right?
Yes. Yep.
What was that like transition like for you? You go from like just being able to be a badass NYPD cop to now you also have this little baby.
Yeah, your perception of life changes.
Yeah.
Now it's not, you might still feel like you're bulletproof, out there, but you have this little life at home that is more important. And the one thing I noticed, you can have a horrible night, a terrible night on patrol or narcotics, whatever it was, and you walk into that house and this little person runs up to you, and jumps in your arms. Everything that happened that night is gone and disappears from your
Mhm.
head. And you just cherish it. And not that, to be honest, not that I went into any situation because I think as a cop you can't do this. Anything I was doing, it was never like, oh my God, I can't do that because of my family. I
Mhm.
never had that in my head. And I don't want anyone to think that I didn't think of my family. That's not the case whatsoever, but I always thought it was more dangerous to have that in your head going
Mhm.
into a situation than, okay, hey, I got out of this. Okay, let me go home and see my family. And that's kind of
Mhm.
how I worked. Like you just said, there was still a lot of dangerous things I was doing even after I had all three of my kids. But I just felt confident in what I was doing and my abilities. Uh, that I was going to be okay. And thankfully I was. But it's a totally different perspective of being a 22-year-old kid running around, Washington Heights and Harlem and okay, cool, whatever happens tonight. And then having the responsibility of being a dad. But then you just have all the good things that are coming, coaching and dresses and dances and school, just everything just gets in your head of, all right, let me get home so I can do this with them.
Yeah, I think you just touched on something important that I've mentioned my dad did really well is when he was at work, and we weren't a distraction for him. He wasn't wrapped up in worrying about us and thinking about what we were doing. He was at work. But then on the flip side, when he was at home, he was home and he was at the game or at the dinner table or the park or whatever we were doing at that moment. And for lack of a better term, I call it compartmentalizing that he did the two things. But I also hear many people say that cops can't compartmentalize or cops can't do the this and the that. And I'm curious, it sounds like it was kind of innate in you, and I think it was innate in my dad in a lot of ways. But I'm curious if you, looking back, have any idea how you were able to do that. I personally, I just want to say, I think it comes from taking care of your family and taking care of the things at home so that you don't have to worry about it when you're at work. But I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, that and I have the best wife in the world.
Yeah.
And that's, and I don't say that lightly, and I don't mean to be all mushy about it on your show, but it's just true. I would never have been able to be what I was at work, the aggressiveness that the way I worked in things I got done and things that came with success, that I was blessed to get to without her. Knowing she was home and how she is with the kids and taking care of the kids. And sometimes, if I wasn't around, being pulled in three different directions with, softball and dance and baseball and having to manage that and me knowing everything was cool. Nothing, everything, they were still going to do everything, even if I wasn't home because Ange was there
Mhm.
taking care of them. And there's no way I would have been successful at my job without knowing home was okay and
Mhm.
and solid and everything was going to dictate their homework, studying. They weren't going to not study for a test. That sure as hell was never going to happen with my wife. Being prepared for school. It was such a blessing, and I'm blessed. I say it every day that she is in my life because everything that happened in the job wouldn't have happened because I would have worried about home. And with the way she was, I never had to worry about that.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make. I think my dad would probably say the same about my mom. They've been together for over 40 years. And my mom, I always call her like the glue because she was the one who was always there. She kept it all together, no matter what she was thinking in her head or what panic she might have been feeling. She really held down the fort, which, to your point, kind of allowed my dad to be all the way at work when she was at home with us. Um, but did your wife also worked though, right?
Yes. Yep. She's a full-time guidance counselor at a middle school.
Yeah, so how did she handle all the things?
You know what? That's a great question. Uh, and you know what it was? It was, she has a great family too, her sister, her
Mhm.
mom, all that. My sisters would help anytime. The support network that surrounded
Yeah.
us, in everyone realizing that, there were times I had to go away for a period of time.
Mhm.
And knowing that she could schedule, okay, I get home at this time, you have practice at this time, we'll do homework at this time, was just an everyday occurrence. And
Mhm.
that was the reason that it worked. Uh, because if I had an inkling, the kids were a mess or she was a mess, I would have been horrible at work because I
Mhm.
wouldn't have been able to do the things I was doing. At the high level I was doing it without knowing everything was cool at home. And
Yeah.
she gets all the credit in the world for that.
And I think that kind of comes down to something I talk about a lot, which is this idea of intentionality and being really intentional with your time, your schedule, how you're spending your time with the kids, with each other, and just not, scrolling your phone or be watching the Netflix or, just willy nilly all the time. It's like sometimes you gotta write it down. That goes back to your calendar that you mentioned earlier. It's like you really have to be intentional with everything that you have when you've got so much going on and so many balls in the air.
Oh yeah, because if your time management is messed up, everything's gonna be messed up.
Mhm.
You don't want to be a robot, but there's times you kind of have to be. We
Yeah.
have to be finished at this time. We got to be home at this time. Those are things that just make every day easier when it comes to kids, obviously, in school and tests and activities. There's times you have to be strict with, all right, we have to get home at this time. You have a
Mhm.
test tomorrow. We have to do a project together, and build whatever. uh, but at the same time, appreciate everything the kids are in and what they're doing and be supportive of that and not make it look like it's a burden.
Mhm.
That was one thing both of us. I mean, we're the two biggest fans probably in the world of what our kids do,
Mhm.
and you can't make baseball practice seem like a burden because your kids are going
Yeah.
to pick up on it. You can't, oh, you have a dance competition. Okay,
Yeah.
can't do that because they
Mhm.
see that, and you have to be positive with everything they're doing, not making it look like it's getting in the way of something else.
I think that's such an important point that you just made because even if you're not or you don't think you're being obvious that you're put out by whatever you've got going on for your kids, they pick up on so much stuff. They pick up on the vibes. They hear things that you don't know that they hear. And I think that that's so important is to have fun and find the fun if you need to in what it is that the kids are involved in because otherwise like, having kids becomes a burden
Yeah,
or a chore because then all it's about is running them around to different places.
right. And they look at it as they're a chore.
Yes. Yeah, and yeah, I think that's such an important point you made because it's something that I talk about sometimes, and I think I should talk about it more because that was a huge piece of the puzzle for us growing up, and I think it's a huge piece of the puzzle for, you know, like law enforcement families in general. We've got so much going on that if we let some of that resentment slip out or slip into our relationship with our kids, it really can have a detrimental impact on their mental health, their well-being, their relationship with their parents, and so on and so forth in their lives.
Oh yeah, and like I said before, I said it before, you get one shot at this. You
Yeah.
know, if you screw it up, it's really hard to get it back to center.
Hmm. So with your wife, I'm curious about your communication with her. Did you guys, you did a lot of like intense stuff, and we didn't talk a whole lot about your career, but you did do a lot of intense stuff. You were in Afghanistan, you dealt with, narcotics, things like that. Did you share stories with her? Was she open to being the person that you kind of unloaded on? How did you guys kind of figure out that dynamic?
Well, in the beginning of my career, yeah, I talked to her a lot, and she was involved with, hey, this happened at work tonight, because I thought that was important anyway, that I didn't keep it inside because you keep stuff
Hmm.
inside, you eventually explode.
Hmm.
And it's never good.
Hmm.
So, if something, especially if it was a cool story,
Yeah.
hey, we did this tonight, and all that. But, there were things I couldn't hide from her. I
Mhm.
mean, when I got in a really bad shooting in 1993, a month after we got married,
Mm.
with three guys, and one of the cops I was with got shot. He survived, but that was an enormous shooting that happened that was on the news and all that. So that I couldn't not tell her about. Uh, but here's the wild part about our communication. Like in the beginning, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of
Yeah.
that. I
Hmm.
got a beeper when when she got pregnant the first time. That was it. So a phone call and communication was, a payphone when I was on meal, of a
Hmm.
5 minute call. Hey, I'm good. Talk to you. I'll see you tonight, type of thing. And I remember one time was really scary for her. And I was not in the middle of it, but somewhat. A cop got shot in the Bronx and got taken to the hospital right near our precinct. And I was on patrol at the time. And the description of the cop, they didn't say he was from the Bronx at first. All they said was they were taking him to Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center, which Ange knew was our hospital that we went to if we got hurt. Around the same age as us, as me, I was at work. This was coming over the news because we were up at the hospital getting him out of the car and getting him into the ER. Just that's what happens when a cop gets shot. Everyone drops everything and you go and do whatever. So I wasn't able to call her and tell her I was okay
Hmm.
until later. And that I think was the only time, and she'll talk about it even today. That was the one time she got really scared, because she was so used to me calling and then I didn't. And she
Yeah.
heard this on the news. So the communication, I tried as much as I could to, hey, I'm okay, I'm here, even if it was a minute. Hey,
Hmm.
I'm good, I'll call you later. And I think that was just so important. But getting back to your original question, I'm sorry. Uh, when I got into the Joint Terrorism Task Force, I couldn't talk to her anymore. All of that stopped.
Yeah.
What I was doing, where I was, cases we were doing, because we were all at a top secret classified level of cases we were doing. So she couldn't know anything I was doing. So that was a dramatic difference in, hey, we did this tonight in narcotics. I hit the door, we went in, we did this, and she'd get mad, like, why do you have to hit the door? Because I'm the Ram guy. Why do you have to do that? Let Carlos do that, or whatever. Uh, but then it just went to, hey, I got to go to California. And that
Mm.
was it. Okay. Hey, I got to go to Vegas. I got to go to, when I went to Afghanistan, she knew I was going to Afghanistan, but had no idea why. I couldn't
Yeah.
even tell her why I was going away for 3 months into a war zone.
And yeah.
I wasn't going to the Bronx. I was going to Afghanistan. But she couldn't know why. And that was hard. That was really hard to do. Uh, but she understood. That was a good thing with being involved in this job for so long. She knew, all right, he's not going over there for a crackhead.
Yeah.
Not going over there to say hi to someone. Something bad's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and the kids were the same. They didn't know why I was going. And they were old enough to know what was going on over there.
Hmm.
Why do you have to go? Why are you going over there? I'm like, listen, something's going on. Dad's got to take care of. Uh, why you? And you get the normal questions, which, stretches you out a little bit, and I had enough on my mind going into a war zone. But they understood, they got it because of just, all right, it's got to be important or else he wouldn't
Mhm.
be going. And then it was kind of cool how they did find out about it. When I got home, I was over there for a kidnapping of a New York Times reporter, got grabbed by an Al Qaeda group, and it was my case with someone else, and worked with the CIA, the Navy SEALs, and all that. We ended up getting them out. So when I got home, I was sitting on the couch. Now we came to a really good agreement that with the New York Times and the media that this wasn't going to be publicized. So no one knew this was going on. It wasn't talked about.
Mhm.
It wasn't on the news. So no one knew about this until he came home. So I was sitting on the couch and I knew it was going to be released this night that he was home and this whole thing. So I'm sitting on the couch and watching the news and the story comes up and they start talking about Afghanistan and his home and blah, blah, blah. And my oldest daughter looked at me and went, "Was that you? That why
Oh,
you went?" And I went, "Yeah, that was it."
wow.
So she
That
jumped
is
up
cool.
and, then the other kids found out, what it was. And I said, "Yeah, that's why I was there."
Wow, that's really cool. What
So
a moment.
yeah, that was pretty cool. That she put two and two together and figured it out. Like I
Yeah.
told you, that was her.
Yeah, there you go. So, like, when you weren't before you got onto the task force, when you were a detective, did you share stories with your kids? Did you, like, share bits of stories with them? How did you handle that?
Yeah, bits of stories. I kind of did, they wouldn't get the details of
Yeah,
some of the things, but
the
and
broad
they would
picture.
and they were curious though. They would ask,
Exactly.
and
Mhm,
I would never lie or make something up or blow something off.
mhm.
Like I said, I would tell them about it, but maybe not as much, as I would. And it's funny because they knew stories, but then they would see me on a show or watch me do a speaking engagement at a high school or a college that I would have them come to just to, have them there because I thought it was important that to see that, which actually my daughter's coming to one in December with me. And then they would hear me tell the actual story and be like, "Are
Mhm.
you kidding?
Yeah.
Like that happened?" I'm like, "Yeah, but you were little. I'm not going to tell you all
Yeah.
this."
They're
Uh,
like, "That's not the PG version you told
no,
everyone."
right. So they were more curious than anything, but I would tell them, certain things. But like I said, once they got old enough to understand it more, the stories got told more.
Mhm.
Because then, hey, what happened when you really did this? And I would tell them the shooting I was in Afghanistan, another big case I was involved in that my kids are actually somewhat involved with, which was really hard to do. But they were sort of in the middle of a case I was running in there,
Yeah.
which was hard, but it worked out. We stopped the school shooting from happening in their high school.
Wow.
So I was investigating and tracking down the kid who was going to do a shooting in the high school that my daughter was a senior and my son was a freshman.
Oh my gosh.
So,
How did you do that?
well, real carefully, because I had to, it was, I, not that I wasn't a dad, but I had to be just a detective and get this guy. Me and
Mhm.
my partner worked our butts off, and putting it together and figuring it out. And we knew who it was. It was just a matter of gathering enough evidence to get him, and just working hard and social media, looking at him and watching him and interviews and all that. And we were able to stop him. His target day was the last day of school. And when we ID'd him, I asked my daughter, I'm like, "Who is this?" And she goes, "I know who he is. I don't know him, but I know who he is." And I'm like, "Okay." And just walked away from her.
Mm.
So
And
again,
she didn't know what was going on.
they knew it was something,
Okay.
she knew, but never asked because
Right.
she knew I wasn't going to tell her anyway. So she didn't
Yeah.
even bother asking through the time frame that we had to put this together. But we ended up stopping him beforehand and arresting him, for making the threats and the things he was searching. And it was a big deal. And stopped it in their school. So that was one of those wow cases
I
that you don't
bet.
hear about a lot, that you're balancing being a dad and being, if I was just a dad, I would just grab the kid. But
I was just gonna ask, like, were you tempted to just, like, pull them out of school and not send them on the last day? Like,
well, we knew, well, we were very confident we had to get him before the last day, so
right.
he wasn't in school anymore. He was still
Oh,
of the age, but he wasn't in the school. So, and we had enough coverage that if anything went sideways, we would have gotten him anyway. But that was one of the most satisfying arrests I made in 30 years. Getting
right.
him when we got him, had enough on him, got him out of the car and cuffed him. It was like just a
Mhm.
weight of got him, got this.
Yeah.
More than I usually got
Do you know what it was like for your kids? Like a
during this
moment
case.
of pride, a moment of
Oh,
fear,
relief.
like
Yeah,
relief?
relief. Because the other part was the hit list that we found that he generated was five of my daughter's best friends.
Oh, wow.
And I knew every one of them personally. I knew them. So that was another part of it. Uh,
Yeah.
so a big relief, and everyone who was at that graduation, which was only a few days later, remembers that graduation because unfortunately it looked like a war zone. Because
That's
as much
scary.
as we were 99.99% sure he was the only one, there was still that 0.1% that we
Mm,
had to make sure. So being that the graduation was outside, it had to be covered like a freaking presidential event. You had
yeah.
speakers, you had temporary headquarters set up, you had ATVs driving around, bag checks. I mean, it was wild. But everyone appreciated and everyone knew at that point what we did and what, stopping him. So everyone understood the extra precautions that were put in, and no one had a problem with it. But it was just looking around, you went, oh, wow, this is a little different graduation.
Did you attend that graduation as a parent or as a cop?
Nope, I was working. I had my
Oh.
job that night was to cover the principal. The
Oh,
principal,
wow.
because he was actually a friend of mine. I know him very well. So
Mhm.
I was shadowing him the whole uh the whole ceremony. So he
Yeah.
was mine. But was enough to kind of watch when they all
You're
got
still
up on
there.
stage. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was working.
Is that something you had to, like, have a conversation with, especially with your daughter afterwards, or, like, something that she needed to talk through, or how what was that like?
Yeah, she was okay with it. She understood, and she was happy it was me doing it because it got done. Uh,
Yeah.
but she got it. She wasn't like nervous. She wasn't nothing stressful about it. She was just glad that the results were what they were, and no one got hurt. The bad guy got locked up. Graduation was a little different than normal, but
Mm.
it was what it was. But no, she was actually fine with it. My son was fine. Like, great job. Hey, you got him. That's what you should do,
All that
Dad.
matters.
Kind
Yeah,
of thing.
exactly.
So yeah, they were actually okay with it.
Great. Okay, I want to get into your podcast, but first I want you to talk about the product impact, and you're going to explain it. But when I learned about it, again, listening to you on another podcast, I thought it was really cool because, and I wanted to share this with you. When I moved to New York, I was 20, and everybody was like, oh, you have to get mace and you have to protect yourself with mace and all this stuff. And my dad had like a hard and fast rule that we didn't use mace, and he didn't buy it for us, and he didn't want us to ever use it. And he would explain to us, you can use mace, but a lot of times it can be more detrimental to you than it actually is for the perpetrator. And depending on the level of whatever is going on in the perpetrator's mind and body, it might not affect them. It will affect you, and then you could be, up the creek without a paddle, worse off than you were to begin with. And so I think this, like on a personal note, when I learned about this product, again, you're going to explain it. I was like, wow, my dad's not crazy. That was legitimate. And everyone who said he was crazy is can go away. Um, and B, it cool that you have created kind of a solve for what is actually a problem that I just mentioned. So if you could share.
Absolutely. What we did is we started off thinking on the law enforcement level of cops are out there and they don't use their pepper spray for every reason you just mentioned. Not even in the civilian side, but cops think the same exact way or in the same situations that you just described as a civilian. They don't use it because it affects them, it hurts their partner. You have to, after you spray the bad guy, you're sitting in the hospital with him for hours waiting for it to clear out of his eyes or clean up or whatever. And then the impact on the respiratory system is something no cop today wants to see or hear on a body cam that I can't breathe. So what we did with Impact was eliminate all that. All the detriments and bad stuff that pepper spray is, we took away. So in Impact, there's a number of things that are just so positive in both verticals that we're right now going after. But on the civilian side, because you brought it up first, there's no blowback and there's no cross-contamination, which means it's not an aerosol. The ingredients impact your eyes. It is an extreme eye irritant. And trust me, I just had it done to me last weekend at a demonstration in Boston. You cannot open your eyes. It is like pieces of glass in your eyes. You can't open them, which throws off your equilibrium, when you can't see and you're in so much pain. It has no impact on your respiratory system whatsoever. But going back to the other part, I can spray impact in a car, in an elevator, in a stairwell, on a bus, and no one is affected by it except the person you're spraying. Nobody at all. There's demonstrations that I've done that I've sprayed someone who's volunteered and go up and wipe their face off and wipe it all over my face, and I'm fine. There is nothing
Wow.
that crosses over to the person using it. Absolutely nothing. And they're in pain when I do this. They're hurting, but I'm wiping their face off and wiping it all over mine, and there's nothing crossing over to me at all. The bottles are nitrogen propelled bottles. So the small MK3 cans can hit someone from 10 to 14 feet away from you. So you don't have to wait for that person to be on you before you think it's a threat. From 10 feet away, you should be able to figure out this is not going to go well. You can spray them, sidestep them, get out of there, and they're not going to see where you are.
Mm.
The other great part on the civilian side is it has a UV dye marker in it. So you spray them, they get tagged with a purple, coloring that they can be identified later on. So because everyone, I get this all the time, like you spray them, they can't see me, so I'm going to kick them. No, you're going to run.
Mhm.
You don't
Yes.
engage in the guy I don't care how hurting he is, you just run. Call 911. The cops can show up later and hit him with a black light, and he'll be covered in the dye. So now you just identified him two times.
Hmm.
You identify him as the victim, and he's identified as, with the spray that you used. So now he's identified twice, which is a big deal. So we have developed this, and it's taken off like crazy. It's all over the place. We're in so many police departments now and sheriff's offices and correction facilities because it's just a better product for what it's used for. Why there's so many people you'd be amazed by when we go to and do these expos that we'll have people come up to us go, yeah, I have pepper spray, but I don't use it. Okay, why? Because it's horrible. Okay, so why are you carrying it? So that's
Yeah.
why we developed this. And civilians too. Yeah, I have it on a keychain, but I'm scared to use it.
Mhm.
All right, well, here's ours. Now you can use it and feel safe and feel like it's going to work. Like you just said, and here's the honesty part of this. There is nothing in life and no police equipment, nothing that's 100% zero. Are there people out there that are going to drink this like Gatorade? Yes. Unfortunately, there is. So but you're still going to have the sting power of it to have enough time to get out of there.
Yeah.
When you look at statistically, a lot of bad guys don't chase their victims because it takes up too much time and draws too much attention. So if you have just that instinct of him closing his eyes because something hit him enough to get out of there, that may be the difference in everything. And like I said, most don't chase down people uh,
Mhm.
because it takes up too much time.
Yeah. So even
So
if it's just enough to put distance between you
yes,
and him.
absolutely right. And a sting factor,
Hmm.
like being stunned by it. That's sometimes all you need. So, we just put this in motion and it's been going great. And if we can help people just feel safer, police officers as well, they need another tool on their body that may not reach the level of a taser, certainly not reaching the level of your firearm, something in the middle of that that can help them out and they can be safe and the bad guy can be safe because there's no impact on their respiratory system at all, and it washes off with just water in a
Hmm.
minute. So all those make law enforcement's job maybe a little easier.
Yeah. And it sounds like so you guys effectively improved two prongs here, both how it comes out and also what exactly does come out.
Exactly. Yep. The distance thing is big because no one wants to wait till someone's on that. You don't want
Right.
that. And our bottles are actually you can turn them upside down and spray them, and
Oh,
they're effective that way as well. We are having our keychains out soon. We're waiting to just get them, which is going to be a big deal, which we can't wait for. We approved the design of them, the color, all that, so they should be coming out soon. And again, we needed to do something to help law enforcement out and, a better marketable option for civilians.
and so to that point, you're both getting into police departments as part of their equipment, and also it's available to any civilian who
Absolutely.
wants to
Yes.
protect themselves.
Yep.
Is it available online
Yeah,
only?
you go right. We have our website. You can order everything on carryimpact.com is where our website is. And you can order anything you want there. And like I said, soon, keep my fingers crossed that the
Yes.
keychains are on there soon. But you order them right there, you pay for it right online, and we get them shipped out really fast.
That's awesome. I love that so much. Okay, now can you tell us about your podcast and anything else that you might be working on that you want to share?
No, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Okay, that's it.
Our podcast, Gold Shields, is something we never thought we'd be at this point. It was an idea a couple of years ago of getting stories out there. A couple of years ago when I thought of this and ran it by Danny, of cops and law enforcement was getting thrown under every bus and backed up over again and again, and the military sometimes as well. And we said there's so many stories out there of incredible achievements and positive stories that we may be able to get these stories out there. That it's not just what you see on the news. There's so many more positive things out there that people need to know about. And luckily, with Dan and I, where we both work, had a lot of contacts, had a lot of opportunities to reach out to people who we knew did some incredible cases. So we started it 2 years ago, almost three now. And we had seven shows lined up. That was it. And we were kind of panicking a little, going, what are we gonna do for number eight? And like, I don't know. Let's let's get to seven and then we'll worry about number eight. And we just recorded our 96th show
Holy
last
cow.
week. So season three will start in January. And they're just, you know what? We're blown away by who we have. And the stories that we hear blow our minds. We'll know, like, I'll do the bookings and I'll know why we want them on, but we never get the full story till we do the show because we want our reactions to be authentic. And a lot of the integral parts of it or the backstage pass, kind of what we say, we don't know about till we do the show. And we've had law enforcement, military, victims, uh, authors of true crime books in their investigations to write a book about high profile cases. And the people we've met over the last couple of years blow our mind. I mean, we're so fortunate to have these people that we call family now. You here, without the show, I'm not talking to you. I don't know Jessica without the show.
Mhm.
Uh, and a number of other people who are now part of, my family and my life, is all resulting of the show. And we keep doing it and we keep getting the good numbers that we're at. And, just hoping to God and lighting candles every week that I don't run out of ideas. And, keep getting, these great people on who they're the show. We don't have a script to the show. It's three
Mhm.
people sitting around talking,
Mhm.
and that I think people really love, especially when it comes to what some of these cases we talk about and not being kind of regimented in Q&A. Just, hey,
Mhm.
tell us about the case, and then
Yeah,
they'll say something. We'll go, oh, hold on, wait a minute. Why did you do that? And it's just that kind of format. And we're very, very lucky and privileged and love it to death and can't wait to just keep going.
that's awesome. And I think it's kind of cool too, because to the point you just made, it's almost like listening in on the conversation of a bunch of cops or people involved in a case just kind of chatting about how it went down, what happened. And I think that that's kind of a cool kind of look into something that a lot of civilians never experience.
Right.
And I also think it's really cool because we talked about offline. I love true crime, but it's really hard to find true crime podcasts where they just stick to the facts that they know from the research that they did. Because as with podcasts, they go off on tangents. And a lot of times, again, civilians don't understand the background, the what's, the whys, the hows of what actually happens in an investigation. So, from a researcher and civilian perspective, they'll go off on a tangent about why law enforcement shouldn't have done this, or why would they do this, or this doesn't make sense, or they dropped the ball on this. And I don't think a lot of times that it's meant in malice, but they will go off on these kind of shitting on the law enforcement and how they handled a case. And it drives me nuts because I'm a civilian, but I do kind of have more of an insight into a lot of things than your average civilian. And in my mind, I'm like answering them. I'm like, well, they didn't do this because of X, Y, and Z, but I can't have a conversation with them. So I end up like getting frustrated and turning it off. But I like true crime. So I love this kind of take where you guys, you do understand the what's and the whys and the hows that law enforcement do things, but also you're giving the person involved a voice and an opportunity to explain themselves and the background behind things.
Right. And there's times that we'll know the answer to some questions, but ask the question anyway because we know someone out there is thinking of that question.
I love
We'll
that.
know why something was done, but we'll want the person who did it to explain why it was done because someone like you just said is out there going, why didn't they do that? So we'll
Mhm.
we'll try to anticipate that sometimes with the questions that we ask. Or just tell our guests, hey, we get it, but explain to our audience why you did that. We'll do that as well. And I just think that's so important. And you hit the nail on the head with people just think cops, the military are just one dimensional. Go
Mhm.
do your job. That's the end of it. And we found the other part of our show that we found being involved with was the mental health part of it. And we didn't start off thinking of it, but we started getting these guests on that one after another were bringing it up. Oh, I went
Mhm.
through this, or this happened, or this happened. And Dan and I just went, all right, we need to really start addressing this. And that was only a handful of shows, maybe halfway through the first season that we went, all right, we need to really put an effort into addressing the mental health issue of law enforcement and the military, PTSD, whatever it may be. And we started doing that and we got involved with more groups that were so positive in the mental health issues of law enforcement with Irish Angel and the Wounded Blue and Blue Lives Matter, all those groups that are now part of our broadcast, our show, and Cop Line, which is so important, that we just talk about each and every week. And the more you talk about it, hopefully, the more people get it and understand it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because mental health isn't even something that you and I had a chance to talk about on this episode, but it is. It's so important for law enforcement, for military, for all first responders to address your mental health. Um, we'll wrap up because even though I could talk to you forever and ever, I want to be mindful of our time. And before we do, I just want to ask you, open the floor, if there's anything else that, we didn't talk about, that we didn't get to, that you want to address.
You know what? No, no, you did a phenomenal job, and I had an absolute blast doing this. And like you just said, we could do this literally
Yeah.
for probably another 3 or 4 hours and not even realize it's 3 or 4 hours. But I love doing this, and we do it at the end of our show all the time. That if you see a cop on the street, wave to him. Say thank you. Someone in the store in their military uniform, pat him on the back and just say thanks. And the reason I say to do that is because you don't know what's going on in that cop's life. He could have just went to the worst job that he's ever going to go to in 20 years. But listen, everyone has to understand this. When you're a cop, you could respond to, like I just said, the worst call you'll have in 20 years, and you're still at work. You're not going home. You're not going to the hospital. You're not. You get back in your radio car and you're going to the next job. So you don't know if that cop just went through that. And if someone goes up to them and says, "Hey, thanks. You're behind them in line. Let me buy you lunch." You have no idea what that does to that officer. And just feeling that, wow, someone just maybe understands where I just came from or what's going on. So it's something we do at the end of our show every week. And that's all I ask people. Just understand that they're human beings. They have good days, they have bad days, they have families, they have friends, and not everything is 24/7 top life. There's
Mhm.
another life that they now have to go home to after a bad day, and just remember that and realize that.
Yeah, such an important point. I'm glad you made that point. Thank you so much. And thank you for this conversation. This was awesome.
I had a great time. Like I said, we could do this all
Yeah,
day. Your questions were awesome. I had a great time. Thank you so much.
thank you.